Part 80. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 791. Chapter 791 Concubine Han Xian who has no moral integrity. Lu Shifei, who originally wanted to sit on the stool, jumped up instantly after hearing this. Her movements were so anxious that the stool behind her was knocked down. Hearing the sound, Queen Zhen 11 slowly opened her eyes and looked at concubine Lu Shu with a half-smile. What is concubine Lu Shu doing? Could it be that the stools in this palace can eat people? Facing Queen Zhen 11's full aura, concubine Lu Shu couldn't stand still. Her legs went weak and she knelt on the ground. If I do something wrong, please give me the queen's advice. I will correct it in time. Empress Zhen 11 curled her lips lightly and said, Concubine Lu Shu is so smart, so why does she need my guidance? Hearing this, concubine Lu Shu broke out in cold sweat. My lord, I don't understand what the queen means. Empress Zhengzi just laughed. Are you trying to act stupid in front of her? Okay, let's see how long she can keep pretending. Some time ago, the second prince's concubine sent a message to the crown prince she didn't want to be embarrassed by a concubine in the second prince's residence. Does Lu Shifei know about this? I have indeed heard about it when concubine Han Xian sent her concubine to the second prince's mansion. I also stopped her, but concubine Han Xian was stubborn. Speaking of which, the second princess is really bolder. Empress Zhen 11 interrupted Lu Shifei's words directly. It was this sentence that directly tore all Lu Shifei's pretense into pieces. It is true that Liao Yue was sent in by concubine Han Xian, but the second princess was the daughter-in-law carefully selected by concubine Lu Shu. No matter how capable Liao Yue is, even if she relies on concubine Yu, her identity as concubine is clearly on the table. Without the recommendation of the second prince, how could Liao Yue meet the prince? Face. As for why the second prince and concubine helped introduce him, of course it was under the order of concubine Lu Shu. Empress Zhen 11 looked at concubine Lu Shu calmly. The sharpness of her black eyes seemed to be able to see through everything. Concubine Lu Shu, you are a smart person. While you are making excuses with concubine Han Xian, you also want to get close to me to support you. You are not afraid of dying. Concubine Lu Shu was really frightened to death. She knelt on the ground and couldn't even speak. You poisoned me, put me in danger, and then came to rescue you. You wanted me to think of you well and understand your pity, but you didn't expect me to be indifferent all the time. It's your plan, so you just poison me again and again. Anyway, you can't count on me. If I die, you may still be able to find favor with concubine Yu. Concubine Lu Shu was trembling all over, her throat was so dry that it hurt. Your Majesty, the Queen. Queen Zhen 11 smiled sarcastically. What are you afraid of? If you dare to do something, you must dare to do it. Concubine Lu Shu was even more frightened, and her face turned pale. She slowly closed her eyes for a long time, then opened them again and mustered up the courage to speak. The Queen is wise. I am ashamed of myself. This is admitted. In other words, it's okay not to admit it. The Queen put all her conspiracies on the table, with clear logic and sufficient evidence. No matter how much she tried to quibble, she couldn't change the situation. It's not that I'm great, it's that you underestimated the crown princess. When I was first poisoned, the crown princess noticed Niduan and even gave me a little thing that can detoxify hundreds of poisons. Zhen, the former queen, took out a small porcelain bottle from her sleeve and gently rubbed it with her fingertips. Concubine Lu Shu looked at the small porcelain bottle in shock, and then she smiled bitterly for a long time. She had heard early on that the crown princess had superb medical skills, but she didn't believe it. Looking at the doctors in the palace, they all had superb medical skills, but the result was just like that. The result was unexpected. The crown princess can indeed be described as having superb medical skills. I am at the disposal of the queen. The skills are not as good as others. Concubine Lu Shu recognized it. This time she really hit the south wall. It's clear that he died. Empress Zhen 11 looked at concubine Lu Shu coldly and said, to deal with you is just to add another corpse to the harem. Even if you are not afraid of death, I still find it unlucky. Concubine Lu Shu was stunned. So the meaning of Queen Empress is, you are treading two boats today. I discovered you, I will not do anything to you, but if it is concubine you who is discovered today, have you ever thought about your fate? Empress Zhen 11 smiled coldly, concubine Lu Shu, you are a smart person. Since you are a smart person, you must decisively let go. If concubine Lu Shu couldn't even understand this sentence, she would be really stupid. The queen is clearly asking her to make a choice. Empress Zhen 11 was not in a hurry when she looked at the silent concubine Lu Shu, but she had no time to sit here and keep looking at concubine Lu Shu's dead face. She waved her hand and asked Lily to send her out of the door. After Lily sent the person away, she returned to the queen. Concubine Lu Shu is still hesitant, that is, she is still reluctant to stay with concubine Yu. I am afraid that concubine Lu Shu will not make a choice so quickly. Queen Zhengzi just smiled and said, then I will help her. Since she dares to let people go, she is confident that people will take the initiative to come to her. Concubine Lu Shu walked out of the imperial palace with a pale face. She was getting more and more uneasy after thinking about it, so she simply walked to concubine Han Xian's bedroom. Unexpectedly, she only found out that concubine Yu was there as soon as she entered the door. I would like to send my regards to concubine Yu. Concubine Lu Shu quickly took the initiative to salute and say hello. Concubine Yu waved her hand and motioned concubine Lu Shu to stand aside. She was also very upset right now and had no time to talk nonsense with a useless thing. Just now, people from the military and horse department went to the imperial court to pray, saying that the fifth prince was attacked and begging the emperor to appoint a medical doctor. Concubine Yu knew clearly that Bailey Rongs had agreed to the matter if the Bingma division came forward. Although this matter cannot really be kept secret forever, concubine Yu always felt that she should delay it any longer, preferably until the fifth prince had only one breath left. Who would have thought that she would not know until Aunt John came back? The reason why Li Rong sent people to the palace so quickly to spread the news was because Fan Qinjiao arrived at the military and horse department in advance and knew about it. Concubine Yu was really troubled by Fan Qinjiao, and now she was extremely upset when she heard the word Fan Qinjiao. Then Fan Qinjiao is a bitch. She is everywhere. I want to tell you that such a little should be thrown into a brothel. It's best to kill her. Concubine Han Xian has always been a talkative person. The scolding is even more vulgar and makes people frown. This is in the palace. It's better for concubine Han Xian to be careful when speaking. Concubine Lu Shu was still tortured by the queen, so she was naturally scared at this time. But concubine Han Xian was not afraid. What's going on in this palace? If you ask me, the queen is just relying on entering the palace earlier than us to show off her power all day long. If concubine Yu was the first to enter the palace, the current queen is just a giver. It's just low quality goods we carry. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 792. Chapter 792, Kneel outside properly. These words are so unpleasant that it is really hard for people to listen to them. Based on the queen's family background, even if she enters the palace later than us, she must at least be a noble concubine. Could it be that concubine Han Xian has forgotten that Uncle Han was just an errand boy for the queen's father? Concubine Lu Shu frowned, she just couldn't see it. She was used to concubine Han Xian's way of speaking freely in order to please concubine Yu. Concubine Han Xian was stunned and was about to continue speaking, but concubine Yu looked at concubine Lu Shu first and sneered. Concubine Lu Shu has become more temperamental after not seeing each other for a few days. What, does concubine Lu Shu want to seek refuge with the queen? Concubine Lu Shu was so frightened that she knelt on the ground and said, I don't dare, my concubine. Although concubine Yu is a noble concubine, she has been favored by the dragon ever since she entered the palace. Over the years, the people in the palace have not been doing well, but concubine Yu has not been affected in any way. It's not that concubine Lu Shu didn't believe in the empress, it's that the empress was played so badly by concubine Yu that her child was gone and her status was in jeopardy. If it weren't for the empress's mother's family strongly recommending the emperor to establish the crown prince, I'm afraid who would be the empress now? Not sure. But what if the emperor actually appointed a prince later in order to stabilize the court? In the end, the emperor did not just do it bit by bit, but completely eradicated the queen's mother's family from the court. Concubine Lu Shu would never believe it if concubine Yu was not stirring up trouble. Concubine Han Xian was even more proud when she saw concubine Lu Shu kneeling on the ground. I'm just a bitch. Only after sitting in that position can I be called a queen. What's there to be afraid of? And that Fan Qinjiao is also a bitch. I have been a who has no father since I was a child, so the empress can only allow that morning star to be her daughter-in-law. This time concubine Lu Shu did not speak, but the palace attendant outside the door did rush in. Concubine Yu, concubine Han Xian, concubine Lu Shu, something happened. Concubine Han Xian sneered nonchalantly, what could happen? Could it be that the queen is dead? The palace attendant did not dare to accept these words. He just lowered his head and said, it is true that something happened to the queen. I heard that the queen's fainting in front of the emperor was not caused by fatigue, but poisoning. Hearing this, concubine Lu Shu was so frightened that she almost fainted on the spot. What is the queen going to do? It is actually very clear what Queen Zhengzi wants to do, which is to confuse the harem. Soon, everyone in the palace learned about the queen's poisoning. At the same time, another news was also spreading quietly. It was concubine Han Xian who poisoned the queen. Concubine Han Xian. What does it have to do with her? No matter how concubine Han Xian explains it, this matter cannot be explained clearly. Concubine Han Xian was originally a person with no reputation for words. This was something everyone in the palace knew. In recent years, with the support of concubine Yu, she had pretended to be powerful and arrogant. Many people had heard concubine Han Xian insulting the queen behind her back. Now that the news that concubine Han Xian poisoned the queen came out, everyone naturally turned their suspicious eyes to concubine Han Xian. Did you, a bitch, slander me, in the palace? Concubine Han Xian pointed at concubine Lu Shu angrily. She had known for a long time that concubine Lu Shu had bad intentions in showing her kindness. It was concubine Yu who kept saying that one more person would lead to more paths, so she never did. Falling out with concubine Lu Shu. Lu Shifei shook her head, it's not me, it's really not me. Concubine Han Xian naturally did not believe it, but if she really insisted that it was concubine Lu Shu, she had no evidence. Nowadays, the rumors in the harem are spreading like crazy. Concubine Han Xian has no choice but to go to the palace to explain to the queen in person. Concubine Han Xian is here by chance, the queen has just gone to bed in the yard. Lily blocked concubine Han Xian from the door with a smile on her face. On normal days, concubine Han Xian would have turned around and left long ago. But today is different from the past. Concubine Han Xian can't leave even if she wants to. If she just leaves like this, what will happen to the rumors in the palace? Wouldn't she have to continue to carry the blame? No matter what concubine Han Xian said, Lily just stood in front of the door with a smile on her face, showing no intention of being accommodating. In this way, no matter how stupid concubine Han Xian was, she could still see that the empress did not see her on purpose. Then I will wait here for the queen. Even if concubine Han Xian cursed the queen over and over in her heart, she could not leave here even half a step, otherwise the rumors in the palace would kill her. Lily said a little embarrassedly, isn't this good? It's so cold outside. It's not cold, I'll wait here, concubine Han Xian said and knelt on the ground. Concubine Han Xian, please take care of your health. Lily looked at concubine Han Xian helplessly, but when she turned around, her face had no expression. In the palace, Queen Zhengzi was drinking tea nonchalantly. Lily walked to the queen's side and whispered, "Queen, concubine Han Xian is kneeling outside." Empress Zhen 11 pursed her lips and said, "So what if she scolds me again behind my back? Now, why don't we obediently blow the cold wind outside, so let her continue to kneel." Lily knew that the queen would not show up for the time being, so she nodded in agreement. The incident of concubine Han Xian kneeling outside the empress's chamber in the cold wind quickly spread throughout the palace, just like the news that the empress had fainted due to poisoning. After concubine Jiangshu heard about this, she smiled and said to the eighth prince concubine in front of her, "The empress is so clever, concubine, you may be so angry that she won't be able to eat for a few days." The eighth princess was stunned. "Didn't you say that the person kneeling outside is concubine Han Xian?" "The one who is kneeling is concubine Han Xian, but the one who hits concubine Yu is on the face." Who in the palace didn't know that concubine Han Xian was a dog following concubine Yu, so this time she suffered a big loss. The most important thing is that concubine Yu is helpless even if she wants to come forward. The queen has been poisoned and passed out. Whether it is true or not, as long as concubine Yu comes to intercede for concubine Han Xian, even concubine Yu will be in trouble. Concubine Yu is really so stupid as to make herself fishy for a dog. Naturally it is impossible. So, I had to let the queen slap me my face. The eighth prince and concubine took a breath after realizing it. It used to be said that concubine Yu was the ruthless character in the palace, but now it seems that this is not the case. The empress hides her secrets and is the most ruthless character in the palace. Not necessarily. Fan Qinjiao's face suddenly appeared in Zhang Shifei's mind. Follow the crown princess carefully from now on. The crown princess is a smart person. When the crown princess sits on the position of queen, she will be far more powerful than the queen, the current queen. The eighth princess nodded. She indeed agreed with this point. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 793. Chapter 793. Father is on our side. Concubine Jiangshu is right, everyone in Yuya Palace is in danger at this time. Concubine Panda came in a hurry after receiving the news. As soon as she entered the door, she saw concubine Yu's upright face turned blue. Concubine Panda looked at concubine Yu's expression and stood aside with fear, not daring to show off her anger. On the other hand, Yunyu, who was recuperating in Yuya Palace, came out and asked, "Concubine mother has had a dispute with the queen recently." Concubine Yu frowned. "Now is a good time for us. I don't have time to trouble the queen." Yunyu was surprised. "Don't you think the queen mother's move was too sudden this time?" Concubine Yu. Thinking about it carefully, it seems that is really the case. Concubine Yu has been dealing with the queen for so many years, but the queen has never found trouble with anyone. Besides, concubine Han Xian scolded the queen behind her back for more than a day or two. If the queen wanted to punish her, why would she wait until now? Did the queen know something? Concubine Yu was confused. Yunyu did not answer, but looked at concubine Panda, who was aside. Seeing this, concubine Panda quickly stood up and left. Yunyu waited until concubine Panda left the yard before she walked up to concubine Yu and said, "Don't worry, concubine, we have done this in such a secretive way, and with the support of our father, we will never let the news out." Concubine Yu nodded, agreeing with Yunyu's words. As long as the emperor is supporting her, what if the queen knows about it? Furthermore, if the queen really knew something, the prince would not still be trapped in the two cities and being fooled. "How is the situation with the third princess?" Concubine Yu asked in a low voice. Although Fan Swinning is not as good as Fan Qinjiao in medical skills, She still has a good mind. With the third prince and concubine watching over her, the queen mother can rest assured. It's difficult for her to be of some use. Concubine Yu had figured everything out, and she felt calm. She didn't care about the rumors in the palace. Anyway, in the near future, both the queen and the prince would have to step aside. The rumors in the palace have not dissipated, and the queen has been recuperating in front of the emperor. Concubine Han Xian knelt like this for 3 days. Meanwhile, concubine Han Xian was so cold that she fainted several times. But when she woke up, she had to grit her teeth and continue kneeling. Otherwise, if you run away while kneeling halfway, wouldn't all the sins ahead have been in vain? Just when concubine Han Xian felt that she might not be able to eat dumplings this year, the queen's body finally recovered and she sent someone to let out the news. The so-called poison had been verified by the imperial doctor, but it was just a conflict between foods. Concubine Han Xian. What else can be said? Humble and walk away quickly. Otherwise, the queen will be poisoned again, and she won't know how many days she will have to kneel. The incident of the queen's poisoning has passed, and concubine Han Xian is fine and has fallen completely ill. Concubine Han Xian was lying on the bed with a blocked nose and dizziness. She was always wondering why the queen suddenly shot at her. While thinking about it, concubine Han Xian thought of concubine Lu Shu. During this period, concubine Lu Shu was the most diligent in running to the empress. Although she told her that she was going to find out about the empress, who could guarantee that concubine Lu would not betray her? The more concubine Han Xian thought about it, the more something was wrong. When concubine Yu came to visit her, she expressed her thoughts. In fact, even if concubine Han Xian didn't say anything, concubine Lu Shu would no longer be able to use concubine Yu after something like this happened. But now that concubine Han Xian had spoken, concubine Yu would naturally follow the trend and put all the responsibilities on concubine Han Xian. After coming out of concubine Han Xian, concubine Yu found concubine Lu Shu. I have said everything that needs to be said. You know concubine Han Xian's temper. Now she has completely fallen out with the queen. If I are no longer there, concubine Han Xian how will you survive in the palace in the future? Unlike you, who has a good temper and is kind-hearted, you will still have a good life even if you leave this palace. Concubine Lu Shu knelt on the ground, unable to say anything. Waiting until concubine Yu stepped out of the threshold, concubine Lu Shu fell limply to the ground as if she had lost all her strength. Mammy hurriedly came over and supported concubine Lu Shu. My queen, please get up quickly. Concubine Lu Shu looked at her with a silly smile. Mammy, do you think I was scared like this by concubine Yu? Grandma was stunned. If not. Lu Shufei smiled and shook her head, saying nothing more. She didn't want to be in two different situations, but she was afraid. She originally thought of it as a double insurance, but she didn't expect that the queen's intervention would directly eliminate her one way out. The queen is forcing me to go over. The smile on Lu Shufei's face became increasingly bitter. Mammy sighed. Now the way out for concubine Yu has been completely cut off. Otherwise, the empress should be more submissive. It is better to be with the empress than not having a big tree beside her. Concubine Lu Shu snuggled next to her grandma, closed her eyes and shook her head without saying a word. Of course she knows that the only way she can go now is to be the queen. If she really bows her head this time, won't she have to be led by the queen forever in the future? Does concubine Lu Shu really not hate her? How can it be? Although things in the palace have calmed down, there are still bits of news leaking out. Although what Fan Kinjao heard was just an At the same time, the fifth prince was still recuperating in the military and horse department, and the emperor had also sent an imperial doctor to diagnose and treat him. However, it had been 3 days and the fifth prince was still in a coma. Fan Kinjao sent people to secretly observe the activities of the fifth prince. Although there was no good news, she was not panicked. Since the queen had taken action, she just waited. Secondly, it is true that the fifth prince was poisoned, but the poison was deep-rooted. Although she could not completely cure it for a while, at least it would not directly kill the fifth prince. Fan Kinjao would rather take advantage of this period of time. Even if the antidote is prepared in the house, it will not be used to undermine the empress. So, we have to wait. Ji Hongliao was also paying attention to what was going on with the fifth prince. For several days in a row, the imperial doctors who came and went did not diagnose and treat him, so he couldn't sit still. After Fan Kinjao heard the news, she quickly asked Ning Tian to send a message to the master, asking the master to be calm for the time being. She was sensible about this matter. The poison in the fifth prince's body is so profound that no matter how the doctors at the imperial hospital diagnose and treat it, it is difficult to detect it. But the master is different. With his medical skills, he will definitely find out that the fifth prince is poisoned as soon as he gets started. The fifth prince was poisoned, and Fan Kinjao didn't want to drag his master and her into this muddy water. When Ji Hongliao received the news, although he and Ning Tian complained a lot, he at least gave up the idea of going to the military horse division. If his apprentice still couldn't believe it, who else could he believe? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 794. Chapter 794, You should be lucky to be the queen. Fan Kinjao breathed a sigh of relief when he heard Ningtian's reply. Seeing that it was getting late, she got up and planned to wash up and go to bed. For several days in a row, she was busy studying and preparing the antidote for the fifth prince. No matter how much she slept during the day, she was still exhausted. It was rare to feel sleepy now. Little miss, someone is looking for you. They are waiting at the door right now. Nanny Su suddenly walked in and said. Fan Kinjao, who was walking towards the bed, stopped and asked, Do you know who it is? Mother Su shook her head. She is a woman, but she refuses to give her name. A woman? Please come in. Fan Kinjao thought that it was probably the person sent by Su Hong. Anyway, he just heard the news and it shouldn't take long. Mama Su left very quickly and came back even faster. When the curtain was lifted, a thin figure wearing a cloak stepped through the door. When he saw Fan Kinjao, the man took the initiative to take off his hat without resorting to litigation. Fan Kinjao, the second prince's concubine. The second princess looked at the disbelief in Fan Kinjao's eyes and smiled bitterly. I thought the princess should know why I came here. Fan Kinjao really didn't expect it just now, but now he really knows it. Sit down. Fan Kinjao walked to Lu Han's bedside and motioned for the second princess to take a seat. Everyone had already entered, so she couldn't speak even if she wanted to. The second prince and concubine took a few steps forward, but it was plop, with a sound. He knelt in front of Fan Kinjao. Fan Kinjao. It seems that it is impossible to say it well. I know that the concubine should not poison the queen, and I should not be showing favor to the queen while still entangled with concubine Yu, but there is nothing I can do about it. I heard that the concubine has been raped by concubine Yu when she was young. The imperial concubine was oppressing her, and the mother-in-law was afraid, so she had no choice but to choose a safer path. The mother concubine mentioned by the second prince's concubine naturally refers to concubine Lu Shu. The reason why the second prince's concubine became the second prince's concubine was entirely facilitated by concubine Lu Shu. For the second concubine, concubine Lu Shu was her former benefactor and the only person she could rely on now. Now that something happened to concubine Lu Shu, she would naturally come to help and plead for mercy. Of Fan Qinjiao only heard that concubine Han Xian was in trouble with the queen, but she didn't know that concubine Lu Shu was also involved. In this way, she also understood the queen's method of knocking mountains and shaking tigers. The second princess also said that this matter happened inside the palace. You and I are both outside the palace. I'm afraid I can't help with this matter. It doesn't mean that Fan Qinjiao must agree to the second prince's request. The second prince's concubine refused to give up, who in the palace doesn't know the queen's love for the prince. Just because the queen loves me, I can help outsiders demolish the queen. In fact, Fan Qinjiao didn't know where the empress was going with this move, but since the empress had taken action, she must have her own reasons. Fan Qinjiao could ignore it, but he couldn't betray. The second princess took a few steps forward again and held Fan Qinjiao's ankle. Now concubine Yu has completely cut off all contact with the mother-in-law. The mother-in-law can hardly move in the palace, and the empress is exerting all kinds of pressure. I just hope that the crown princess can intercede with the queen. Love can be sought, but not everyone is worthy. When concubine Lu Shu dared to poison the empress, she should have been prepared to end up today. Fan Qinjiao didn't know what happened in the palace, but it was certain that concubine Lu Shu poisoned the empress. This little trick could not help her. You can't even hide it, let alone the queen. The second princess was stunned. Mother, the concubine poisoned the queen? No, it won't happen. When this matter was first reported in the palace, it was concubine Han Xian. Fan Qinjiao sneered and interrupted. The person who passed the news was concubine Han Xian, but who was the one who learned the lesson in the end? The second prince's concubine. Isn't it still unclear who it is? Concubine Lu Shu even did something like poisoning the queen. Now she is just reaping the consequences. I don't think there is anything pitiable. On the contrary, I feel that the queen is kind. If it were me, I would be afraid of the second prince and concubine. Even if I want to plead for concubine Lu Shu, it's too late. Who can't even plead for mercy? Of course he is a dead person. Looking at Fan Qinjiao's dark eyes with a cold light, the second princess couldn't help but tremble. The mother-in-law said that the crown princess was more powerful than the queen, but she was stupid at the time and did not believe it. Fan Qinjiao withdrew his legs and had no time to accompany the second princess and stare at her. Instead of the second princess kneeling here to beg me, it would be better to enlighten concubine Lu Shu. The queen did punish her, but isn't she still alive and well? The second princess was stunned for a moment. What the princess means is, as long as you are alive, everything will turn around. It all depends on the decision of the person involved. The second princess looked at Fan Qinjiao in silence for a long time, then nodded and stood up to leave. It was because she was reckless and did not see the way clearly. The princess was right. As long as a person is alive, there is no death. Fan Qinjiao looked at the leaving figure of the second prince and concubine. He was still half sleepy, so he simply turned back to the desk and continued to study the antidote. With the queen's methods, it was easy to kill concubine Lu Shu. Since concubine Lu Shu is still alive, it means that the queen still has some use for her. Although Fan Qinjiao didn't know the reason, it didn't stop her from helping to push concubine Lu Shu towards the queen mother. The second princess did not persuade Fan Qinjiao, but was invisibly persuaded by Fan Qinjiao. After leaving the western suburbs mansion, she rushed directly to the palace. Concubine Lu Shu is also in a state of distress now. She really didn't expect that the empress would be so ruthless and cut off concubine Yu's side. Now even her status in the palace is in jeopardy, especially those from the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Not treating her as a human being at all. Looking at concubine Lu Shu's current situation, the second prince's concubine was frightened and distressed. She could only persuade her. In my opinion, the mother-in-law should bow her head to the empress, otherwise if this continues, I don't know whether I can survive the next winter. Lu Shufei sighed. I understand. The successive blows from reality have long since wiped away concubine Lu Shu's hatred for the queen. Even if you can live is a question, what else do you hate? Early the next morning, concubine Lu Shu took the initiative to come to the queen mother. Empress Zhen 11 was still peaceful, concubine Lu Shu is here. As soon as concubine Lu Shu heard the queen's voice, her legs felt weak and she quickly knelt on the ground. I was stupid before, so I asked the queen to show me a clear path. Queen Zhen 11 nodded with satisfaction. Lily, please help me up. It happened that the Ministry of Internal Affairs sent me some sets of dresses yesterday. I thought the colors were too light, but now I think they are suitable for concubine Lu Shu. Concubine Lu Shu stood up with Lily and saw a maid carrying a tray entering the door. Looking at the exquisite clothes on the tray, Lu Shufei swallowed hard. What does the queen want to do? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 795. Chapter 795 moved away. What Queen Zhen 11 wanted to do was very simple. After concubine Lu Shu changed her clothes, she smiled and asked, if I remember correctly, concubine Lu Shu has not slept with her for a long time. Concubine Lu Shu raised her head in shock, completely unable to believe what she heard. Which woman in this palace doesn't want to sleep with you? This is what she has only dreamed of. Empress Zhen 11 smiled and said, look how happy concubine Lu Shu is. She even forgot to thank her. Lily hurriedly walked to concubine Lu Shu's side. As long as concubine Shu follows the instructions given by the Empress, today's bedtime will definitely not be the last one for concubine Shu. I thank you, the queen, for your kindness. Concubine Lu Shu knelt on the ground again and kowtowed heavily. Of course she knew that the queen was not just letting her sleep alone. But no matter what the queen wanted to explain, she had no reason to refuse. Concubine Shu can think so, but everyone is happy. The queen has already asked people to put makeup on concubine Shu and comb her hair. Concubine Shu can just follow the servants. Lily helped concubine Lu stand up and gave her away in person. Arriving at the side hall. Naturally, concubine Lu Shu would not refuse. She completely obeyed and cooperated. When she was dressing up, she kept everything Lily said in mind. Almost half an hour later, Lily asked the person she had bribed to come and pick her up. Concubine Lu Shu. After seeing off concubine Lu Shu, Lily was busy coming back to report to the Empress. Unexpectedly, as soon as she entered the door, she saw the Empress leaning on the arhat bed, looking out the window at the birds landing on the branches in a daze. The eyes were dull and lifeless, and the expression was so hollow that it made people feel panicked. Lily knew that no matter how much the Empress hated the Emperor was still the Empress's husband. She pushed other women to her husband's bed with her own hands. Which woman can really feel at ease? Sent concubine Lu Shu away, Queen Zhen 11 asked softly, her eyes still looking out the window. Lily lowered her voice and said, everything was done according to the queen's instructions. Concubine Lu Shu also promised that she would recommend the crown princess to the fifth prince for diagnosis and treatment when the emperor is in trouble. Queen Zhen 11 nodded gently. This concubine Lu Shu finally bowed her head obediently. Lily looked at the queen's face and felt distressed. Actually, the queen could have proposed it to the emperor herself. Now the emperor is no longer as cold to the queen as before. Lily. Empress Zhen 11 interrupted sharply and turned to look at Lily. Some words are more effective only if outsiders say them, and the emperor's suspicion will not be so serious. But the queen. Okay, I'm exhausted. Empress Zhengzi waved her hand to stop what Lily was about to say. Of course she knew what Lily was going to say. But Lily didn't know that she would rather send other women to that bed than climb up on it herself. Just now, she just remembered a sentence, she would like to be a winged bird in the sky, and a twig on the ground. Ah! Sad, ridiculous. Concubine Lu Shu's bedtime went smoothly. Early the next morning, the emperor issued an oral order, temporarily leaving the fifth prince to the crown princess for personal diagnosis and treatment. As for him, he was still being cared for in the military and horse department. Fan Kinjao was relieved when he got the news. He quickly got into the carriage with Ning'an and Lanja and hurried towards the soldiers and horses department. There are still many guards in front of the gate of the Bingma division. But as soon as they saw the crown princess getting off the carriage, the guards, not to mention blocking her, stepped back to make way, not even daring to say a single unnecessary word. After all, the bloodstains of the previous captain of the guard are still soaked in the door and have not completely faded away. Isn't it nice to live well? Why do you have to live with your own life? Fan Kinjao left Ninghan and Langya at the door and entered the army and horse department alone. He followed the leader to the backyard. When he entered the door, he saw the fifth prince, who was still unconscious. After not seeing him for a few days, although the fifth prince's condition has not improved, the clothes on his body have obviously been changed, and the soft white cloth on his head is also brand new, which shows that the imperial doctors are also attentive. Fan Kinjao carefully checked the fifth prince's pulse. Sure enough, the result was still the same as that day. The toxins in the body had not yet been eliminated. Although it was a little more serious than before, fortunately it was still within Fan Kinjao's control. Fan Kinjao skillfully opened the medicine box, put the medicine prepared in the past few days into the fifth prince's mouth, and then dropped the silver needles one by one according to the acupuncture points for detoxification. Soon, a blood bag visibly bulged on the fifth prince's left middle finger. Fan Kinjao took out the bone knife and gently opened his middle finger, and purple-black blood spurted out. Immediately afterwards, a rotten stench dissipated. This poison is not fatal for the time being, but if it stays in the human body for a long time, it will corrode the internal organs of the human body little by little, and eventually everything in the stomach will turn into a puddle of rotten water. Now that the rotten blood in the fifth prince's body can be discharged, it proves that Fan Kinjao's antidote is effective. However, if you want to cure it with this method, you must not rush. You need to force out all the rotten blood in the fifth prince's body little by little. Fortunately, Fan Kinjao has plenty of time. Woo, woo. Fan Kinjao had just stopped the fifth prince's bleeding when his hoarse moans and groans could be heard on the bed. Fan Kinjao quickly looked at the fifth prince, and saw that the fifth prince's chapped lips were struggling hard. Yi-er, zhao, zhao, yi, er. Although the sound was intermittent and powerful, Fan Kinjao still heard it. Zhao Yi-er. I knew that the fifth prince was kind to Zhao Yi-er, but I didn't expect that his affection would be so deep. After leaving the military and horse division and getting on the carriage, Fan Kinjao told Ning'an, "Help me find a person named Zhao Yi in the next few days. The sooner the better. When people are sick, they always miss the person they care about the most." Ning'an can be regarded as a know-it-all in the main city. As long as she can tell someone about anything, she can figure it out. Soon, Ning'an found out about Zhao Yi. But when Ning'an arrived, she found that the house was already full of people. Moved, Fan Kinjao frowned. She had only met Zhao Yi once. Because she didn't like her, she didn't pay close attention to her afterwards. The slave asked carefully and said that he had moved away a few days ago. There were quite a few people who came to pick him up at that time, and the carriage belonged to an old woman, so the people nearby were concerned. If Fan Kinjao remembers correctly, Zhao Yi is not from the main city, so there is no such thing as acknowledging his ancestors and returning to the clan. The only thing that can mobilize troops and move people like this is a carriage and an old lady. The answer seems to be only one. Miss, do you still want to continue looking? Forget it. Whether the fifth prince knew about Zhao Yi's departure or not, there was no need to look for her anymore. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 796. Chapter 796 King Nanzai became a thief. With the turn of the year, the days are passing faster and faster. Unconsciously, pear blossoms were blooming all over the city. The Dragon Boat Festival is approaching, and the sixth prince of Donglan Kingdom arrives in the main city accompanied by an envoy. During the Emperor Jiaozu's time, Donglan and Ziliang were also rivals on the battlefield. Later, the new Emperor Donglan came to power and took the initiative to reach an alliance agreement with Ziliang, which was considered to be on par with Ziliang's national power and material resources. With the arrival of the Donglan Kingdom, the attention of the people has gradually been diverted. Now the only one who still cares about the ice lantern is the queen, and she asks Yan Qian next to her to visit the Bingma division every now and then. To this day, the fifth prince is still unconscious in the military and horse division. Fan Qinjiao is not in a hurry. To completely eliminate toxins, they need to be excreted from the body again and again. In the final analysis, it still takes time. However, Fan Qinjiao would naturally not tell the people in the military and horse division about such a thing. As a result, the people in the Bingma division increasingly regarded the fifth prince as a treasure, fearing that this man would have some strengths and weaknesses in the Bingma division. Bailey Fengming's letter will still be delivered on time, but there is still not much progress regarding the missing children in the two cities. However, Bailey Fengming mentioned it in the letter, and Qinkai School found out some incredible things, but these things still need further confirmation. Bailey Fengming didn't say what was going on in the letter, and Fan Qinjiao simply didn't ask in detail. After briefly explaining the current situation in the main city, he put the envelope in the wax pill and handed it to the waiter. Chai Wu is on the side. "Little miss, the whale is here." Nanny Su came in from outside and said. "Please come in." Fan Qinjiao was a little surprised by Peng Jing's arrival. Ever since she handed over the shop to Mu Yan, neither Peng Jing would bother her easily about the shop. Peng Jing came very quickly. When he saw Fan Qinjiao, he still saluted respectfully and said, "Miss." Fan Qinjiao smiled and asked Ningguan to bring a chair and motioned Peng Jing to sit down and talk. "What's the matter?" In fact, when Peng Jing entered the door, he looked like a hero who would never return, but now when he looked at Fan Qinjiao, he didn't know what to say. Ningguan looked at Peng Jing's unspeakable expression and knew that it might not be a good thing. She quickly turned around and walked out, not forgetting to close the door with her and guard the door. Fan Qinjiao was not in a hurry. While Peng Jing was confused, she simply found a medical book and read it. Recently, she wanted to change the prescription for the fifth prince. The room gradually became quiet. Fan Qinjiao just lowered his head and read the book seriously, with no intention of pressing him. Peng Jing looked at the young lady who was always calm and composed, and her anxious and tangled heart slowly calmed down. "Miss," after taking a deep breath, Peng Jing spoke again. Fan Qinjiao hummed, his eyes still falling on the medical book in his hand. "Have you decided what to say?" Peng Jing clenched his hands and suddenly said with firm eyes, "During this period, King Nanzai's accounts have not been reconciled. But has it been carefully verified?" Peng Jing gritted his teeth before speaking again. "Miss Mu Yan secretly tampered with the money in the account." Fan Qinjiao's hand that was flipping through the book paused, and he raised his eyes to Peng Jing. "Are you sure?" The slave didn't dare lie in front of the lady. At first, the slave thought that he had attracted a thief. He was afraid of scaring Miss Mu Yan, so he just discussed with Yu Luo in private and took turns staying in King Nanzai at night. Unexpectedly, it was actually a thief. I saw Miss Mu Yan come back in the middle of the night, misappropriating the money in the account, and changing the account. If there is no definite certainty, Peng Jing certainly cannot slander Mu Yan. Although he and Yu Luo are close friends of the young lady, since the young lady has handed over the Qing Nangzai to Miss Mu Yan, he and Yu Luo have the responsibility to help Miss Mu Yan make the Qing Nang Zai the best possible. It lived up to the lady's expectations and hard work. Yu Luo also saw with her own eyes that Mu Yan had touched the money in the account. Fan Qinjiao asked. Peng Jing nodded. If it was just him who saw it, he would rather think that he saw something wrong. Prepare the carriage. Fan Qinjiao stood up and picked up the cloak beside him. Peng Jing quickly stood up and followed Fan Qinjiao out. Fan Qinjiao has not stepped into the door of Qingnanzai for a long time since he handed over Qingnanzai to Mu Yan. Firstly, he did not want to put pressure on Mu Yan. Secondly, he also hoped that Mu Yan could learn to be independent. Mu Yan did not let him. She was disappointed, and Qingnanzai did a good job, and its reputation in the main city did not decline. After getting off the carriage, Fan Qinjiao entered Qingnanzai accompanied by Peng Jing. It was Yu Luo who was standing inside the counter when he saw the young lady coming in and hurriedly greeted her, Miss Mu Yan, who was in the accounting room at the back, heard the sound and hurriedly came out. Why is third sister here? Fan Qinjiao didn't seem to see the hidden panic in Mu Yan's eyes, and said with a smile, I came here to take a look when I had nothing to do. I happened to be short of some medicinal materials, so I thought I would take some back from you first. Mu Yan knew that during this period, the third sister had been preparing medicinal materials in the yard. Although she didn't know the reason, she was obviously relieved. Whatever medicinal materials the third sister needs, just take them as long as they are here. They are all common medicinal materials. Fan Qinjiao named several medicines. Mu Yan thought about it carefully and realized that Qingnanzai really had these medicinal materials. Then she looked at Yu Luo and said, the motherwort is on the shelf on the east side of the warehouse. It was just dried yesterday and was packed directly for the third sister. The bezoar and peony are on the east side. In the cabinet, one is placed on the third floor and the other is placed on the fifth floor. Remember to be careful when loading, and keep the two medicinal materials separately. Yu Luo looked at Mu Yan in embarrassment. Miss Mu Yan is in charge of the medicinal materials in the warehouse. What should I do if a clumsy servant like me messes up those medicinal materials? Mu Yan smiled and said, it's okay, I'll just sort it out if it's messed up. Facing Mu Yan's approachability, Yu Luo didn't know what to say to get away. With no choice, Yu Luo could only look to Peng Jing for help. Peng Jing. After confirming his eyes, it was time for him to bravely rush forward. There is no reason for someone to mess up the things you organize by yourself. Miss Mu Yan, you have a naturally sensitive sense of smell. You will not pick up the wrong things even with your eyes closed. If there is no Miss Mu Yan will definitely become the next doctor of the Tao family. Girl, you have carefully arranged and cared for those medicinal materials. Yu Luo, let alone touching them, even smelling them is a kind of blasphemy to you. Mu Yan. It's not that exaggerated. The moon sets. Can you be more exaggerated? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 797. Chapter 797. Yunyu was proposed for marriage. Mu Yan was already thin-skinned, but now she was so praised by Peng Jing that she was so shy that she couldn't even lift her head. Peng Jing. Why not only did you not leave, but you stood still? Did he use too much force? Yu Luo rolled her eyes at Peng Jing speechlessly. If you push harder, Miss Mu Yan can go to the sky. Fan Qinjiao looked at Mu Yan with a smile and said, Peng Jing is right about one thing. It is easier to find the things you organize by yourself. If Yu Luo really rummaged through all the medicinal materials and messed them up, even if you don't mind, I'm afraid Yu Luo will also feel guilty. Mu Yan got along well with Yu Luo and Peng Jing during this period, and she knew that they had always been very tolerant to her. Now after listening to the third sister's words, she was more worried that Yu Luo would feel guilty, so she nodded and said, then okay, third sister, wait a moment, I will go find it myself. Fan Kinjao smiled and nodded, go ahead, don't be in a hurry. It was not until Mu Yan entered the warehouse at the back that the smile on her face completely disappeared. Yu Luo and Peng Jing looked at the young lady's face where the smile had disappeared, and they both became serious. Peng Jing led the lady directly behind the counter, dug out the problematic accounts he had discovered before, and placed them in front of Fan Kinjao. This Jingnangzai is managed by Fan Kinjao single-handedly. Even if he has never used it again for more than a year, he will not look unfamiliar now. Peng Jing's account is very clean, and just looking at it is pleasing to the eye. In fact, Mu Yan was already very attentive and cautious. It might be difficult for other people to spot him, but Peng Jing is the kind of person who is naturally sensitive to numbers and accounts, and he can spot Ni Duan almost effortlessly. Fan Kinjao carefully checked the accounts written by Peng Jing finger on the account and carefully calculated them in his mind. There were indeed discrepancies. Each sum is indeed a small amount, but when added together in twos and threes, the money becomes more. There are tens of thousands of taels. Fan Kinjao took a look at the time of changes in the accounts, and found that the earliest one was 3 months ago. Did Miss Mu Yan encounter some difficulty? I heard that Miss Mu Yan was about to get married. Maybe the man thought Miss Mu Yan's dowry was too small, so Mu Yan. Yu Luo thought about Miss Mu Yan. Although she is considerate, she can never connect her with the thief who stole the account. Fan Kinjao shook his head. She personally handled and purchased the dowry for the youngest daughter in the palace, and the amount has long exceeded that of ladies from other high-ranking mansions in the main city. As for the Zhou family, this marriage was personally agreed upon by the old lady of the Zhou family. Even if she was not married yet, she was still the crown princess appointed by the emperor. The Zhou family was not said to be greedy for money. Even if they were really greedy, they would not have the guts to force Mu Yan to do so. Yu Luo, you are always attentive. Keep an eye on Mu Yan during this period and tell me immediately if you find anything. Fan Kinjao thought about Mu Yan's restlessness on the carriage some time ago, maybe it was related to this incident. Yu Luo nodded and said, don't worry, miss, just leave it to your servant. Well, I'm going to see if Miss Mu Yan needs any help. Peng Jing turned around and went to the warehouse. He couldn't tell whether he felt uncomfortable or guilty. Yu Luo also followed suit, miss, sit down for a while, and I'll go take a look, too. Fan Kinjao smiled and nodded, go ahead. Fan Kinjao is very pleased that Yu Luo and Peng Jing have such a good relationship with Mu Yan. He raised his eyes and looked around. There was not a speck of dust on the shelves. Every item was neatly arranged, and the new seasonal products were carefully placed in the most eye-catching places. It was obvious at first glance that they were carefully placed. Such dedication cannot be achieved by one person. It requires everyone in the shop to work together to make the shop so pleasing to the eye. Finally found you behind him, a familiar laughter suddenly sounded. Fan Kinjao turned around and saw Yan Hanbei looking at her with a bright smile. Why are you here? Fan Kinjao helped Yan Hanbei into the shop and pulled her to sit on the round stool where the guests were resting. Seeing that Yan Hanbei's belly had grown a few times, he habitually put his hand on her pulse. I went to look for you at my house. I came here when I heard you were here. Yan Hanbei really enjoyed the feeling of being taken care of and valued. Instead of politely declining, he enjoyed it openly. After a long while, Fan Kinjao retracted his hand and said, the fetus is very stable. Yan Hanbei took it for granted, that's natural. Today's life is not as miserable as before. The servants are busy with all the big and small things in the house. Every day when I open my eyes, I just enjoy the flowers. Damn it, the eldest prince has to come back every day to supervise my meals, making me feel like a prisoner. Fan Kinjao also did not expect that the eldest prince and Yan Hanbei, the least favored couple, are now living a more enjoyable life. It is probably because they have experienced more, people will become more and more cherished and relieved. So you came here specifically to show off to me, Fan Kinjao said with a smile. Yan Hanbei rolled his eyes. I don't dare to show off to anyone, but I don't dare to show off to you. Who in the main city doesn't know that the prince is a treasure? Your treasure is so tight. I hold it in my hand for fear of losing it, and hold it in my mouth for fear of melting. I came here specifically to tell you jokes. Fan Kinjao. What kind of joke is worth chasing me for several streets with a big belly? Looking at Fan Kinjao's clueless look, Yan Hanbei felt envious in his heart. Donglin is here to visit, so it's natural for the emperor to host a banquet, and naturally we all have to be present. Fan Kinjao nodded. Is there any need to say this? She had actually been waiting for a banquet in the palace for a long time, but she didn't expect that there had been no news after such a long time. You have done a great job in taking care of the fifth prince. The queen specially advised the emperor not to let you have troubles inside and outside the palace. This has made the rest of us miserable. We have to run into the palace early in the morning, which has been a full day of tossing. When I left the palace, it was completely dark. Yan Hanbei couldn't eat for several days just thinking about having to stand, sit, laugh, and eat with him with a big belly. Fan Kinjao was stunned. Is it done? If not. Fan Kinjao was still stunned. She really didn't know anything about it from beginning to end. Yan Hanbei sighed. You are so envious of all our daughters-in-law. The queen really loves you. Otherwise, as the crown princess, why wouldn't I torture you to death in such an occasion? Fan Kinjao. She really can't help with this matter, so she can only let others slowly envy her. You don't know, there are so many rules in Donglin country. Even if you follow the locals, you can follow a lot of rules whether it's eating or talking. Even the emperor is on pins and needles, not to mention the rest of us. Yes, and the sixth prince of Donglin. Yan Hanbei's eyes lit up when he said this. I proposed marriage to Princess Yunyu in public. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 798. Chapter 798, She won't feel sleepy if she wants to say this. Fan Kinjao raised his eyebrows, proposing marriage in public. Yan Hanbei nodded and said, no, in front of everyone in the hall. He stood up and walked to Princess Yunyu. What he said was so red that it was hard to listen to it, but the sixth prince of Donglin. Then I spotted Yunyu. Yunyu couldn't stay any longer and was about to leave. Donglin's sixth prince stepped forward to stop her. They didn't know how to pull her apart, and then they both fell to the ground and kissed her. Fan Kinjao was really shocked. Ziliang's national custom is not too conservative, but it does not allow unmarried men and women to be intimate publicly. As a princess of Ziliang, Yunyu had such an incident with the sixth prince Donglin in the main hall, which was said to be an insult to the national custom. Not an exaggeration. Even if Fan Kinjao was not present, he could still imagine the different expressions of everyone in the hall at that time. Sure enough, Yan Hanbei said again, you haven't seen concubine Yu's face, it's so dark. Tisk, 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 tisk. The most important thing is that the sixth prince of Donglin Kingdom didn't think there was anything wrong, and actually made peace with the emperor. When the queen proposed marriage, she said that she and Princess Yunyu fell in love at first sight and wanted to fly together. Really, concubine Yu was just relying on her age because she was not too old, otherwise she would really get angry on the spot. Fan Kinjao was naturally happy to watch concubine Yu's excitement. Even if you just take it as a joke, it's quite entertaining. However, the betrothal gift offered by the sixth prince of Donglin Kingdom is really considerable. He said that he will pay tribute for 3 years. Our Princess Yunyu is really valuable. 3 years of tribute, this betrothal gift is indeed not a small amount. What did the emperor say? The emperor declined, probably because he couldn't bear to part with Princess Yunyu. Fan Qingjao smiled coldly and said nothing. It is really flattering to use reluctant to describe a person who is selfish to the bone. I heard that Bailey Fengming said in the letter that the emperor's expenses have been very high recently, and the mines in Huaishang have obviously been unable to support them. The appearance of the sixth prince of the Donglan kingdom at this time is really a timely help. But the emperor actually declined, which is a bit unbelievable. Selfish people certainly won't suddenly become selfless. I'm afraid there's something hidden in it. However, the sixth prince of Donglan kingdom does not seem to have the intention to give up. He is still in the palace and is inquiring about Princess Yunyu's news every day. I heard that today he specially blocked Princess Yunyu's return to Yueyu Palace. On the way, Princess Yunyu was so frightened that she wandered around the palace all morning without daring to return to Yueyu Palace. I heard that she later followed the palace people through the small door and escaped from the sixth prince Donglan. When the allied powers come to visit, they naturally have to stay for a while. Just like the former Jinai kingdom, they spent consecutive years in Ziliang. Although Fan Qingjao is not very interested in whether Yunyu will marry or not, it is not a bad thing to have the sixth prince of Donglan kingdom. At least during this period, it can divert concubine Yu's attention and let them continue. There was no time to plot against Bailey Fengming. A carriage suddenly stopped at the door of King Nanzai. As the carriage door was opened, with the support of several maids, a slim figure got out of the carriage and walked slowly towards King Nanzai. So the famous King Nanzai is like this. A voice mixed with admiration and sarcasm sounded at the door, and at the same time, the face of the speaker gradually became clear in the room. Fan Qingjao followed the sound, but his eyebrows were raised unconsciously. No wonder this voice sounds so familiar. It turns out that I really have met an acquaintance. Zhao Yi. After not seeing each other for a while, this Zhao Yi is completely different from before. At the beginning, the woman was still dressed delicately, but now she is wearing silk and satin, with gold hairpins and gold ornaments on her temples, and her movements are full of luxury and nobility. Even Fan Qingjao has to admit that this is a qualitative leap. Zhao Yi also saw Fan Qingjao. She was stunned for a moment, and then walked over with a smile on her face. I didn't expect my sister to be here too. Are you here to buy something? Yan Hanbei became energetic as soon as he heard the word sister. Who is this person? What is your last name? What does it mean to call you sister? The blazing fire of gossip is burning in his eyes, and his little eyes are sparkling with curiosity. Zhao Yi looked at Fan Qingjao condescendingly and didn't think there was anything wrong with her title. Fan Qingjao was younger than her, and when she called Fan Qingjao fourth sister-in-law, she was just following Bailey Lingyu. Fan Qingjao smiled and did not worry about the issue of title. He glanced at the people following Zhao Yi and said, "My fifth brother kept calling Miss Zhao's name when he was injured. I asked someone to find Miss Zhao some time ago. Later, I heard from the neighbors who live around Miss Zhao that Miss Zhao has moved away." Zhao Yi nodded calmly. "I came to the main city to look for someone. Now that I have found him, I naturally have to move away. As for the fifth brother from my sister's family, I have a close relationship with him after all. In this case, I don't even have the intention to visit." So, Miss Zhao's lover finally got married. Fan Qingjao remembered that Bailey Fengming said that Zhao Yi had a marriage, and later came to the main city to find her fiancé. Zhao Yi smiled proudly and said, "What my sister said is that my husband is the young master of the Qing family of Dali Temple." "Minister of Dali Temple?" Fan Qingjao laughed and shook his head. This main city is really getting smaller and smaller. The maid who was following Zhao Yi saw that Zhao Yi had been standing here chatting, so she urged in a low voice, "Aunt Zhao, we have to go back before noon." Almost instantly, the smile on Zhao Yi's face froze. The smile on Fan Qingjiao's face actually became brighter. It turns out to be Aunt Zhao. It seems that when I see Miss Zhao again in the future, I will also change my title. Zhao Yi forced her raised chin. When a woman marries, she wants to be comfortable and happy. I am not a worldly person, and I never care about those statuses. As long as the person I love loves me deeply, that's it. Everyone has his or her own ambitions, and there is no reason to force everything. I won't tell my sister for now. My husband is still waiting for me to have lunch at the house. I will buy some things and leave. Fan Qinjiao smiled and nodded. Please help yourself. Zhao Yi led the people and picked up things in Qingnanzai in a showy manner. Yu Luo happened to hear the sound and came out. When she saw the young lady nodded to her, she didn't say much and introduced the things to Zhao Yi dutifully. Yan Hanbei stared with big eyes and almost put the words 38 on his forehead. Who is this person? Fan Qinjiao said softly, a friend of the fifth prince. Yan Hanbei's head was spinning much faster now. Is she the woman brought back from Subay? You know. Yan Han smiled mysteriously when he met Fan Qinjiao's surprised look. She is no longer sleepy when talking about this. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 799. Chapter 799. It's totally impossible. I remember that after the eighth princess met Zhao Yi in the restaurant, she always felt uneasy. However, if she found the princess in person for such a trivial matter, she was afraid that the princess would be mean-spirited, so what she had been thinking about was to find Yan Hanbei for advice. When Yan Hanbei heard about this, he didn't take it seriously at all. Who is Fan Qinjiao? The hurricane is coming, the wind and clouds are moving, but she is the only one who doesn't move. It's just a misunderstanding. Fan Qinjiao, how can you have time to take it to heart? There is absolutely no need for the eighth prince to be brooding over such a thing. The eighth prince's concubine, who was completely relieved of her nod, also relaxed her mind and pulled Yan Hanbei to talk a lot about Zhao Yi. At that time, Yan Hanbei was just enjoying the show, and he never expected to see him today. Let me tell you, the fifth prince should have revealed his identity as early as possible. With Zhao Yi's temperament, if he really knew that there was a current fifth prince beside him who was making secret glances, would he still have the heart to be someone's little wife? Yan Hanbei said straightforward, but rough in words and not rough in reasoning. Women always understand women best. Who is Zhao Yi, and how can she escape the scrutiny of these royal daughters-in-law? Zhao Yi's peaceful appearance is nothing more than a trick to deceive men. Such a woman does indeed have some integrity, but when she happens to fall on the fifth prince who is straighter than a steel bar, it has a different effect. It's pretty good now, Fan Qinjiao said with a smile. Even Zhao Yi probably couldn't imagine that the fifth prince was a person who didn't act according to common sense at all. Yan Hanbei took a look at Zhao Yi's wealth when she was buying things, and nodded in agreement. I heard that the fifth prince in my family said that the fifth prince lived the simplest life among all the princes. If he really fell into the hands of this Miss Zhao, here, I'm afraid I'll be sold to someone else for money. Fan Qinjiao nodded. It's best this way. Miss Zhao becomes Aunt Zhao, and from now on the water in the well will not interfere with the river. Yan Hanbei sighed. The fifth prince was still in a coma. If he knew that Zhao Yi was married, it would be a lot of harm. But she and Fan Qinjiao both knew that with the fifth prince's character, if he really married Zhao Yi in the future. I'm afraid it won't happen in the future. One is short-term damage, the other is long-lasting output. I really don't know whether to say that the fifth prince has a bad life or a good life. Zhao Yi bought a lot of things over there, while Yu Luo was busy packing and settling accounts. Everything was already going well, but unexpectedly, before Zhao Yi went out, she suddenly looked at Fan Qinjiao and said with a smile, I've been watching my sister Sid for so long, and she hasn't bought anything, but I'm so short of money. Yan Hanbei, who was drinking tea, almost sprayed his mouth full of tea when he heard this. Can Fan Kinjao not afford the things from Kingnanzai? This entire Kingnanzai is Fan Kinjao's fault. Yu Luo also looked at Zhao Yi speechlessly, really not knowing what to say. Kingnanzai's store has been continuously expanding in recent years, but as soon as new products are put on the shelves every season, the supply is still in short supply. Even the money currently on the books can be counted on one hand. The lady in this store really gives he married Miss Muan, but how could the money from Kingnanzai have nothing to do with the lady? To put it simply, as long as the lady thinks about it, it all belongs to the lady. Fan Kinjao met Zhao Yi's gaze and smiled faintly. What exactly does Aunt Zhao want to say? Seeing that Fan Kinjao didn't answer directly, Zhao Yi confirmed her suspicion even more and signaled to the maid next to her to tell one of the things. The things were handed to Fan Kinjao. Now that we have met, it is always difficult to leave my sister empty-handed. This small gift should be given to my sister. The maid looked at Fan Kinjao taking the things, and her expression became a little subtle. She was serving Zhao Yi, but she was also sent there by the madam. Now she looked at the extravagance and waste of a young ant who had just passed by, and her expression could not be better. Fan Kinjao calmly took in the maid's expression, then looked at Zhao Yi and said, I didn't expect Aunt Zhao to be so generous. If so, how about giving my friend another small gift? I don't think Aunt Zhao is so generous. You shouldn't care about this little money, right? The maidservant's face was not good at first, but when she heard Fan Kinjao's words, she almost jumped up. Send it back. Do you really think that the money in their house was blown by the strong wind? Ever since Zhao Yi met Bailey Fengming, that handsome face has been dazzling in front of her eyes. Now she is promoting herself like this in order to find some inner balance. She not only tells herself but also tells Fan Kinjao to find someone. What's the use of such a handsome man? How could I imagine that Fan Kinjao is not ashamed but proud? Zhao Yi also said it very painfully. Facing death, Fan Kinjao added, Aunt Zhao has something to hide. If that's the case, forget it. Another heavy blow hit Zhao Yi's heart. How could it be? It's just a little thing. If my sister likes to pick it up, just pick it up. Zhao Yi, who was driven away from the store, had to smile elegantly and generously even if her heart was bleeding. If this matter were placed on other people, maybe they really wouldn't be able to get away with it, but Zhao Yi really deserves to be so unlucky that she met Yan Hanbei. Excuse me? Absolutely not possible. Yan Hanbei had already felt itchy when he saw Fan Kinjao having fun. Now after hearing these words, he stood up and took Yu Luo to carefully shop in the shop, although the last thing he picked was not too big. It was expensive, but when the maid paid the bill, her face obviously darkened again. The moon sets. I just want to give my lady a thumbs up. As soon as Zhao Yi left, Yan Hanbei looked at Fan Kinjao and said with a smile, sure enough, the worst is the crown princess. Just because of that maid's black mountain face just now, Zhao Yi will suffer it all night. Fan Kinjao played with the things Zhao Yi gave and smiled lightly. Zhao Yi wanted to make a show, so she just made it happen. It is said that Zhao Yi has some tricks, otherwise she would not really squeeze into the house of the Dali Temple minister. But these methods are really not enough in Fan Kinjao's eyes. After Mu Yan packed the medicinal materials, Fan Kinjao followed Yan Hanbei out of Kingnanzai. He first sent Yan Hanbei to the carriage, and then she took the carriage to the Bingma division. Now Fan Kinjao enters the gate of the Army and Horses division as if he were walking through the door of his own house, which is called a luxury and familiar road. After all, he was ordered by the emperor to diagnose the pulse of the fifth prince. Not to mention other people in the Army and Horse department, even Bailey Rongs had to accept the fact that Fan Kinjao was wandering around in the Army and Horse department every day. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 800. Chapter 800 depends on whether the high branches can be held up. Cough cough cough, cough cough cough. As soon as Fan Kinjao entered the door, he heard a violent cough. He quickly walked to the bed and saw the unconscious fifth prince frowning and breathing heavily in his chest. Zhao, Yi, Yi. Immediately afterwards, Zhao Yi's name came out from the fifth prince's mouth again. The guard guarding the fifth prince looked at the appearance of the fifth prince and was so frightened that he knelt on the ground and said, "Prince Concubine, the fifth prince has been calling this name in the past few days, and sometimes he will spit out the food you put in." Fan Kinjao looked at the guard with a cold face. "Why didn't you tell me before?" The guard trembled, but he did not dare to speak again. But even if he didn't say it, would Fan Kinjao really not know? Now that the fifth prince is being trained in the military and horse department, everyone in the military and horse department is not frightened for fear that something will happen to the fifth prince. It is impossible for the people in the military and horse department not to report this kind of thing, so the only possibility is that Bailey Wrongs will give it to him. Pressed down. As for why Bailey Wrongs pressed down, the purpose is clear without even thinking about it. I'm afraid he just wishes that the fifth prince would never wake up again. Fan Kinjao looked at the guard kneeling in front of him. Even though he was filled with anger, he knew that Bailey Wrongs' little actions were disgusting, but the real problem was not here. Even if Bailey Wrongs doesn't want the fifth prince to wake up, as long as the fifth prince strives for his own success, can Bailey Wrongs really stab someone to death? Of course it's impossible. A person like Bailey Wrongs, who is extremely hypocritical, can only play small tricks behind his back. So the problem still lies with Zhao Yi. Wanting to understand this, Fan Kinjao called Nanny Su in front of her when she returned home. "Can I trouble Nanny Su to go to the Dali Temple minister's house in person? There is no need to identify the fifth prince. You only need to tell the fifth prince's current name if you know the situation. Just inform Aunt Zhao in the young master's room." Mother Su is an old man in the house, so it was only because she came forward that she took this matter more seriously. The comatose person is still conscious, so the fifth prince can only hear Zhao Yi's voice at the moment. Fan Kinjao doesn't really need Zhao Yi to turn around and marry the fifth prince, a person who has become someone else's concubine. Even if Zhao Yi really has that intention, not to mention Fan Kinjao, even the Queen Mother will not agree. Mama Su left quickly, but came back very slowly. Nearly an hour later, the curtain was lifted and the door was entered. "Little miss, I'm an old slave and have no use for it." "I haven't seen Aunt Zhao," Nanny Su said with an unkind expression. "What happened?" Fan Kinjao, who was writing a reply to Bailey Fengming, stopped writing. Nanny Su handled things carefully and properly. She had gone out with her grandmother to do a lot of things before. She didn't believe that the problem would be with Su. On grandma's body. What can Su Yan look at the gaze of Miss? Tell the truth, of course. Aunt Su indeed knocked on the door of Dali Temple Ching's mansion, got through to the concierge, and went to the mansion to call Aunt Zhao's personal maid. And even spent a lot of money. Unexpectedly, the maidservant had been gone for most of an hour. When she came back, she only told Aunt Su that Aunt Zhao had said that she and the fifth young master were just ordinary friends. They were not close to each other, so it was best not to meet each other in the future. Fan Kinjao's face turned cold. Normal friend? Thanks to that Zhao Yi for being able to speak out? Fan Kinjao knew who the fifth prince was. He was able to think about Zhao Yi and even concealed his identity. A dignified prince spent all his time trying to please the beauty, even condescending and spending money and effort. And as a result, we got a simple friend. Zhao Yi used to eat and use the fifth prince, but how come she never had with a man or woman? Now that I have become an ant, do you feel like you are flying up a branch and becoming a phoenix? Fan Kinjao smiled coldly. She thought, well, if Zhao Yi is really a person who appreciates kindness and repays her kindness, then forget about it. Since she plans to turn her back on him, Fan Kinjao doesn't need to pamper her anymore. Go and invite the housekeeper from the fifth prince's residence. Fan Kinjao looked at Nanny Su and said. The housekeeper of the fifth prince's residence came very quickly. As soon as he saw Fan Kinjao, he knelt down to say hello. Old slave, please say hello to the crown princess. Fan Kinjao asked Ningguang to bring a chair and motioned for people to sit down and talk. I wonder if the old housekeeper knows the accounts of the fifth prince's house. When the old housekeeper was in the house, he often heard His Highness praise the crown princess. In addition, with the relationship with the prince, the old housekeeper knew everything about Fan Kinjao. It's clear, it's all clear. The prince has always been thrifty, so whether it is the expenses of the palace or the money spent by the fifth prince, it is all well organized and well documented. Fan Kinjao nodded and said, this is best, but I still have to trouble the old housekeeper. The old housekeeper hurriedly said, whatever the princess has to say, just ask her. Ningguang stood aside and listened to her young lady explain one by one to the old housekeeper of the fifth prince's residence. However, she really didn't know what the young lady was going to do, so she could only look at Nanny Su for help. Mother Su. Silly boy, why do you even need to ask? It's obvious that the young lady is going to make big moves. It was already an hour later when Ningguang sent the old housekeeper of the fifth prince's mansion out. Fan Kinjao sat in front of the desk but did not show any signs of relaxation. Zhao Yi's move is undoubtedly not to kill the donkey. This kind of trick was something that Fan Kinjao had seen frequently on Liao Yue when he followed Bailey Rongs in his previous life. Having achieved your goal, you just want to pat your and leave? I really thought that the fifth prince was an innocent and easygoing bully. Fan Kinjao's lips curled into a sneer. Zhao Yi wants to climb a high branch, but she must first see if she can hold up the high branch under her feet. Fan Kinjao has never been a person driven by anger. She knew very well that if she wanted to recover the debts of the fifth prince from Zhao Yi with interest, it was not enough to just rely on the old housekeeper in the fifth prince's house. She also needs an introduction. A stepping stone that can knock on the door of the Dali Temple Qing's residence. When it comes to the relationship network in the main city, Sun Kentung's mother is naturally the best. But this matter involves the fifth prince after all. Fan Kinjao doesn't want to make this matter too big, otherwise the fifth prince will not be able to behave well after he wakes up. After thinking about it, Fan Kinjao thought of Yan Hanbei. The eldest prince is the first among this group of princes to be crowned king. There are many people who want to curry favor with him. Even if they don't curry favor with him, they all want to have a good relationship. However, high-level mansions are all about face. Yes, of course the men in the house will not come forward, so this matter basically falls on the ladies behind the scenes. Those ladies who want to establish relations with Prince Pinglei's palace have no choice but to approach Princess Pinglei. Ningguang, you go to Prince Pinglei's mansion now. Fan Kinjao looked at Ningguang and said. Ningguang nodded, turned around and walked out the door. End of this chapter.